All right, well, it's been a busy week and a half or 2 weeks doing a lot of projects, and now it's time to clean up because we want to get the planter in the shop. So we pulled everything out, and we're gonna do some cleaning in the shop, and then on Monday, when it's not minus 35 out, we will bring the planter in and start tearing it down. We put some soap and some degreaser on the floor after we swept it, and we're gonna get it cleaned up good. We got the planter in the shop. There's a lot to do to the tractor, and there is a ton to do to the planter. We got a lot of acres we're gonna run it on. So Andrew's back there, he's pulling off all the meters. He's gonna go through the meters. We'll get this thing stripped down just to the bare bar. Yeah, Andrew's saying we got like 3,500 acres we're gonna put on the planter this year, and we just want it to work good. Don't want any issues. This is my initial list of everything I'm gonna check out. I'm sure when I start tearing it down, I will find some more things that I need to replace or change or fix, but this is where we're gonna start, and we'll just start knocking them off the list, and we'll come up with a whole list of what we need to order. The nice thing about doing these projects in the winter is you can find better parts or better priced parts, and you can wait a bit for the parts to come in. All right, I got my flashlight and paint marker, and we're gonna start going through this thing. We're gonna do it one piece at a time. So I'm gonna start with closing wheels, inspect all the closing wheels, take them all off, and then move on to the gauge wheels. So I'm going through them here. This one's got some wobble, so I marked it. And then this one, bearing's good, doesn't wobble, but the rubber, it's getting thin and it's worn through there. So we will just mark that and keep going through them. All right, got all the closing wheels taken off. There's 15 that have either got loose bearings or the rubber on the outside's worn. So get some of those. Now we will start pulling off the gauge wheels. I've got most of them off, and these ones, I don't test them when they're on the machine. I've got a little jig that I set up in the vise, and that's what I use to test the bearings. I got all the gauge wheels off. I got my trolley. I'm picking them up, bringing them over to the vise, which is where I'll set up my jig and start testing them. And Andrew is pulling off the chains. We're gonna start oiling them and checking the sprockets while he does that, and just continue to make some progress. I don't know what the weight capacity on this cart is, but I think we're getting to near the limit. Now I've got all the gauge wheels off. They're stacked up. I haven't tested them yet to see if any are bad, but now we're pulling scrapers off. They're just held on with springs. They're a bit of a pain to do, especially one-handed, but now we're pulling those off and checking wear on these carbide edges. I got all the scrapers pulled off. They're all right here. There was 4 sets that were bad. I managed to cobble together a set from the 4, so that I needed to only replace 3 sets of scrapers, which we had some in stock, which is awesome. So we'll get those done up. And then we also had 1 bent arm. So scrapers are in good shape. Last year was a hard, wet year. While I was pulling off the dust caps for these row openers, the True V's, you could really tell that this area in the tires just took a lot of wear from mud. We had dust caps in here that were just worn through. These chains were getting knocked off because of mud buildup. It was just a hard year. This planter worked really well last year, but because of that, we have some more parts that'll probably end up needing changed. But I mean, it's an important piece of equipment, and you have to put the money into it for maintenance if you want it to produce. We're not out here trying to do a subpar job and raise a great crop. We're out here to try and do the best that we can to increase our chances of having a great crop and, you know, making this farm thing work. So we are going through this thing, and we're going to check out everything. It's a lot of wheels, a lot of parts off, and we're taking more parts off yet. So I was starting to pull these opening discs off, but I realized I can't get them off with the gauge wheel arms on still, so we're gonna pull these and then we'll get those. Nice thing is they just stun bolt real easily, just like that. Well, now I've got all the gauge wheel arms torn off. I'm gonna grab my cart, start collecting them, and then move on to the True V's. The thing you need to remember when you're working on either the opening discs or the closing wheels is that there is left-hand thread and right-hand thread on this machine. So if you're loosening and it's not loosening, maybe try the other direction and it might help. Yeah, it was a muddy year. There's mud in all these things, but we're changing these seed tube guards this year. That's a big issue we're having with wearing out discs. In our soils and our conditions, on the planter, we are not wearing out the disc before the bearing or the housing gets loose, because we're in clay soil but with lots of rocks. So it's all those impacts of the rocks just banging out the bearings that really makes us change discs before they're worn out, because I don't want to have any bearing issues in season. Well, my pile of John Deere parts is continuing to grow, but we are getting there. Now we've got everything torn off. The last piece that we need to take off are the frogs, which are also known as the seed tube guards. And these are worn down. This is the 15-inch row, so it's not as used as often as the 30-inch row, but these are worn down, and our rows, the width of the trench is not what it should be, and we're having worse seed placement because of it. So we are going to be changing all of these. I'm sure these are factory. They probably got 40,000 acres on them, which is crazy, but we have clay soil and not sandy soil, so it doesn't wear out as fast. Once I'm done taking all the seed tube guards off, then I'm going to spend the next 5 or 6 hours testing and measuring the opening blades and checking the gauge wheel bearings and doing all that. Then I can order parts. We know what we'll need. And then we'll start putting stuff together once I get those parts in. We'll probably end up ordering some from Shoop. Once we have these rows all torn down like this, we're gonna get in here, we're gonna clean out all this mud, and then every year we get in here and clean out the eye on the seed tube sensor. So if I pull this one out, here is your sensor that tells you what population you are planting at. If you don't clean these eyes every year, you start getting false readings, inconsistent readings, and some intermittent readings, and that really is an issue. So when the thing's apart, you just clean these every year. It makes a big difference. We are very much in the teardown and inspection phase. So now I've gone and inspected every single closing wheel spring and where it mounts. And these holes where the spring sits in they tend to get worn. So this one's not bad, but we have one right here that you can see all that play. So we are going to weld those. And then at the same time as expecting all those springs, also just take a look at the mustaches here that your gauge wheels ride on. We'll get another year or two out of those. While I was tearing down the row units, I had my brother taking the chains off. So all of the chains are in this bucket of oil. They'll probably sit in there for a week at least. And then at the same time, we inspected all these bushing or bearings on the idlers and the drives here. We found that there is a rough bushing in here on this one. So while we have it apart, we'll just change them both. So over the years of working on this planter, we've made some specialty tools that kind of help us out along the way. This is one we clamp into the vise. On this stud, we test our gauge wheel bearings. And on this stud, we check our opening discs for, run out, loose bearing cases, just rough bearings, all that on this side. And while we are checking them, we also have this tool, which we just hold up to it, and you can tell whether it's worn out by the overall diameter of the disc. That one, bearing's tight, but it's loud, and it's about 14 3/4 inch. One down, 61 to go. All right, I've gone through all the opening discs now. There was 16 that were either really loose or noisy. So those ones are getting changed. Then there were 6 that had a little bit of play. So I'm gonna keep them, but I've marked them and they will go on the 15-inch rows because those see less use. And then this is a pile of just good ones. And whenever I go through them, I always measure them and mark them so that I can put them with a similar size disc. Now we're gonna start doing the gauge wheels. All right, well, we've gone through most of the wear items. There was one gauge wheel that was bad. We had one in stock and we still have a spare, so I don't need to order that. And now I'm working on pricing and availability, and we're gonna get parts ordered. It has been so nice having this whiteboard. So there's my list. I'm going through, knocking some things out. But I wanted to go over what I need to order first so that I can get ordering things, and then while those are coming in, then I can do some of these little tedious things while I'm waiting on parts. There's only a few more things to do in the tear down and inspection phase. I'm pulling off these tail units because the bushings are all worn out and there's a lot of play in them. And then I'm not taking off these link arms yet, but I am gonna get a bushing kit and rebuild them because there's just so much play. Now I've got all the closing wheel tail pieces taken off. We'll get a bushing kit for that. Now the rest of the inspection is just going to be going over the runs and the FERT tubes, and we're just going to be looking for kinked lines or lines that have worn out little spots in them. And you're just going to look at every little piece, the lines, the connectors, the airbags. We're going to do a leak down test to see if the airbags are leaking, because usually there's a couple leaky spots every year. And then you just kind of work through it front to back and look at all those things. But the biggest part is row unit maintenance, because that is always wearing out. This is the planter on the ground. Lots of parts. And the next time you see this planter, we will have gotten our parts in, and we're going to start putting things back together.